8. Could British servicemen and women be asked to fight and die to defend the people of Helsinki or Lapinranta or indeed anywhere else on Finland's 800-mile border with Russia? That is the implication of the country's decision to join NATO, the alliance based on the principle that an attack on one is an attack on all. In the last few minutes, the President of Finland has issued a statement. NATO membership would strengthen Finland's security, he writes. As a member of NATO, Finland would strengthen the entire defence alliance. Finland must apply for NATO membership without delay. We hope the national steps still needed to make this decision will be taken rapidly within the next few days. The reason this matters is because it is such a dramatic change with the past, not just the recent past, but the past ever since the Second World War, when Finland has been neutral. It is also a dramatic change for Russia, which back in the early 1990s had a border with NATO which was less than 200 kilometres. If this happens, if Sweden joins too, that border will become 2,400 kilometres, the whole of Russia's western border, in effect. We're joined now by a Vice President of the National Coalition Party, the opposition party in Finland, who is a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee, Elina Valtonen. Good morning to you and thank you for joining us.
Good morning and thank you so much.
How significant a day is this for you and for your country?
This is a very significant and historical day to our country. We have been partnering with NATO for a very long time, but clearly taking the step of becoming members or sending the membership application, that's a historical move for us.
Your president talks in his statement about the next steps. We're not there yet either in Finland or indeed in NATO's decision-making processes. So what has to happen next?
In Parliament, as we speak, Foreign Affairs Committee is preparing a report on the changed security environment around Finland and Sweden. And probably during the weekend, we will conclude that Finland should join NATO. And after that, probably next week, the government will be able to proceed with the application.
Now, your party has long been in favour of NATO membership, but it's not very long ago that more than half of Finns were opposed to the idea. Have you been surprised by the speed of change?
Well, what has happened this spring has clearly showed everybody that we are living next to a very unpredictable and an aggressive neighbour, that is Putin's Russia. And it's a very natural step to react. Even though we have very strong defense forces ourselves.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think the breaking news coming through on your phone from the BBC, that was the sound of a breaking news flash on your phone, which is the news that Finland will apply for NATO membership. So we briefly lost what you were saying there. Pick up if you would.
Okay. Yes. So as the president puts in his statement as well, we would strengthen the alliance ourselves as well, because we have very strong defense forces. We have a conscription army, and indeed, together with our reserve, we have one of the strongest armies in Europe, not only in relative terms, but also in absolute terms.
Now, for Finns, you have memories of conflict with Russia, of the horror of World War II, of what became known as Finlandization, the sort of intimidation of an entire nation during the period of the Soviet Union. But is the threat now real? Do you feel a threat from Russia?
We do feel a threat from Russia, and I don't think that threat ever went away entirely. Finland never took the step of diminishing its defense forces. We have always taken security very seriously. And as I said, we are very much focused on defending ourselves. But of course, we would like to do that together with our close partners and allies, hopefully in the future, because we share the same values. We are a Western country. Finland has been a stable democracy for over 100 years, and it's just a natural step to take.
That is the pledge that you had from the British Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who was visiting yesterday, that in the interim period before you become NATO members, in what some people call the grey zone, you now expect, do you, that Britain has promised, the British government has promised, that in the event of an invasion of Finland or an incursion into Finland, British forces would come to your aid?
Yes, but vice versa. Finland is also there to help Britain if there's anything that threatens our security and our values.
Elina Valtonen, thank you very much indeed for joining us, and we're glad you have the BBC News app on your phone. You got the breaking news that Finland is applying to join NATO. Now, there are many people who've been involved in NATO over the years who regard this as important because it strengthens what they insist is a defensive alliance. Amongst them is a former Deputy Supreme Commander in Europe, General Sir Richard Sheriff, a friend of the programme who I've been speaking to. I asked him why he believed that Finland should be welcomed by NATO.
Because without question, the NATO alliance is going to be much stronger with Finland and hopefully with Sweden as well. They will both bring, and the Finns, having said they're going to hopefully join, will now bring a real capability to the alliance.
Bring what exactly?
They've got very effective armed forces, but I think more broadly, by being part of NATO, the security of the Baltic region will be much, much tighter. The air defense, for example, will be much more integrated. Having said all that, we should be clear that Finland and Sweden have both been very long-standing NATO partners, so they will be very easy to integrate into the alliance.
On the other hand, of course, it is a dramatic change, not just for the people of those countries, but of course for Russia, which continues to condemn NATO expansion and will no doubt see this in the Kremlin as evidence of NATO's aggression.
We can expect the usual stuff from Russia. Russia will kick off. Russia will make a lot of noises. There'll be a lot of intimidation, bullying. I think we can expect to see Russia up to its usual tricks in terms of trying to manipulate media, trying to undermine the integrity of the state through cyber attacks and the like. But NATO's got to stand firm. And related to this, as I continue to say, when NATO takes risk, NATO has got to take risk from a position of strength, and NATO can do much more in that respect.
You don't have to be a supporter of Vladimir Putin or of Russia to argue, however, that NATO is at risk of learning nothing, is it? If it continues to expand, something that would be regarded as hostile by any leader in the Kremlin, are we not proving that we've learned nothing from recent history?
I think on the contrary, NATO remains very clearly a defensive alliance encapsulated by that doctrine of collective defense articulated by Article 5. NATO membership is decided upon by free, independent, democratic nations, and providing they satisfy the criteria and can add value to the alliance, they join. And that's how NATO has grown. And NATO has grown, let's be clear, also because of the nature of the threat. Finland and Sweden would not be joining NATO if Putin had not invaded Ukraine. That act of outrageous, brutal, vicious aggression is what is prompting nations to recognize that their security is better served by being part of a defensive alliance like NATO rather than standing alone.
Article 5, which you quote from NATO's constitution, has the very simple idea, but the very consequential idea that an attack on one is an attack on all. How would you explain to someone listening who has a child or a grandchild in the armed forces that their son or daughter might one day have to risk their lives in order to defend the people of Helsinki, for example?
By saying that our security, our freedom, depends on the freedom and security of Finland and Sweden as well. Our front line does not start on the White Cliffs of Dover. It starts on the borders of the Baltic states, for example. Any border, any part of the NATO border bordering Russia is under threat from a revanchist, imperialist, neo-imperialist nation under an autocrat who is determined and prepared to wreak total havoc and devastation on his neighbors in order to satisfy his political aims. And that means that all of our security is a threat.
You're speaking to us this morning from Sweden. You're at a conference with Swedes, with Finns. How dramatic a change is it for them?
Oh, I think this is really dramatic. Finland's been a neutral country since the Second World War. Sweden's been neutral since the Napoleonic Wars. So this is really dramatic for them, but it's really important for NATO as well.
General Sir Richard Sheriff, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
It's 19 minutes past 8. When Steve Jobs, one of the great industrialists and engineers of the modern period, returned to Apple in 1996, the company was in bad shape. He had founded it 20 years earlier, but left. Upon his return,